being more aware of your subconscious. And again, that can be oh, what is that in my gut or my neck? Or I feel this twinge, or, oh, I feel nauseous, or I'm uncomfortable, or a thought. Sometimes it's not just a feeling, it's a thought, but our subconscious is trying to relay things to us. And so often, if you're busy like me, you aren't paying attention. You're just doing your thing.
Welcome to the Serve Love Lift podcast. I'm Tiffany Garvin. Years ago on a quiet beach in Hawaii, I felt the weight of the pain and struggles we all face in this world and how much we need each other. Soon after, this movement was born to serve, love, and lift. I believe that we are meant to serve the world with our unique gifts, love ourselves and others, and lift each other up to live with joy. This podcast is here to help you heal your heart and your life and empower you on your path to becoming the best version of yourself. I invite you to listen carefully and jot down notes that come to mind, whether they come from me or from your own heart. Then, share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get going. I'm so honored to visit today with Chaplain Krista Hull, founder and executive director of Redeem and Restore Center, where they love, restore, and support women broken by sex trafficking and exploitation. They support each woman as a whole person, physically, mentally, relationally, emotionally, and spiritually. Fueled with compassion, Krista's desire to help hurting women stems from being a survivor of child sexual abuse and abandonment. She has turned her trauma into her mission. She is a crisis intervention specialist, a life coach, trauma care certified, a passionate speaker and podcast host, and a chaplain. Thank you for being here, Krista. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
Your journey and your passion for this cause are so inspiring. I would love for you to share some of the profound lessons you've learned along the way.
Well, the longest and biggest lesson so far would be, you hear those people talk about that God doesn't call the prepared, He prepares them Himself. I will say, because I was not prepared and I did not have the tools or the understanding to do what we do today when I even started. It was really these spiritual blinders that He put on me, and I was just willing to go. Yeah. And I had no idea that, especially during the first 5 years, that most of that was actually healing and growth for me personally as I prepared in serving others. And as I began to serve others, He was working on me in ways that I didn't even know I needed, but became very, very obvious during that journey. So yes, that would be the longest, biggest one so far, but there's many more.
Well, I love that. I definitely can relate to that. I've had my traumas and my difficulties, but never did I imagine I'd be sitting here with you talking about trauma survivors and how we can help them and how we can bring awareness to the world about healing from trauma and how we can still move forward in our lives, that there is healing.
Yes. As I've told you before, I find that the biggest part of what I realized beginning and doing this work is that I was very broken and I had no idea how much. But of course, there's many more. You can always find someone worse, right? You can always find someone that is hurting more or struggle more. But the point is that we're all human. We have all been broken and hurt by someone. We could have had a wonderful family, but we have still experienced loneliness. We've still experienced some rejection and probably a few different forms of abuse and many of the other emotions, anxiety. And that is the core of our humanness, of who we are, how we function, how we feel. And as you stated, in what we do is trying to reach people as a whole person, because we aren't just our job. We aren't just a survivor of trauma. We aren't just this or just that. Those are parts and pieces, but we are all of these things. We are made up of the physical body and what's happened to us, the relationships that we've gone through, some form of spirituality or no form of spirituality. All those parts make us a whole person. We can't just separate those pieces. They're all intertwined. And so knowing that, and knowing that we are all human, and whether it's a different culture, a different city, a different country, different experiences, we can all relate to one another and help one another, because we are human, because we are all made foundationally the same. What we all desire is to be seen, valued, and known. That is the core under everything that we do, everything we're expecting and looking for. And so, again, teaching people that and acknowledging that and putting it in the forefront of others' minds is how we can begin to see the world a little different, see people a little different, not just judgmental, but wow, how did they get there? Or why in the world would they think that's okay to do that? Or what happened that they think that's okay? Or that kind of thing. Asking the different questions instead of just judgments, or they're different, or I don't like it, all those things. And now I feel I'm rambling, but hey.
Oh, I love it. It's all true. It's all real. It is what makes us related and relatable. It's that we can understand each other. And I think that piece of it, that we've all gone through something really hard, helps us be able to help each other. Because I know you've probably sat down with many, many women and been able to tell them, no, I get it. I understand the pain. And I may not have gone through exactly what you went through, but I understand the pain, the loneliness, the worthlessness, the awful things that tear you up inside and make you question the whole world. And to have somebody sit across from you and tell you these things when you feel like you're all alone, or that you are somehow so awful that this happened to you, it suddenly shines that ray of light. It suddenly reignites hope. Oh, I'm not this anomaly. I'm not the only one in the world that's been traumatized. I think that is so, so powerful. And I love that your focus is to love and restore and support, because like you said, we all just need that love. We all need to be seen. We all need to know that we are okay in and of ourselves, and that the rest of us will be okay, right? There is healing, there is hope.
And even with all the trauma, someone can say, what's wrong with me, or why is this, or why is that? But again, going back to, yes, that's a piece, and that's what you feel, and that's the overwhelming, but underneath it, there's still that beauty there, and pointing that out to others. What is beautiful? What is good that you see in them, and helping them begin to question what they've held on to and believed. Because when someone has been traumatized, and again, at all kinds of levels, they become beliefs, your filter of how you see others and how you think everyone sees you. And so getting them to question those beliefs that they were holding on to is the beginning. Again, we can't fix other people. We can't just say all these certain words, or just be present and make it all beautiful. But it's the opportunity to bring in the questions. That was a huge piece for me, and still learning it. No one ever asked me questions growing up. And so even for me to ask questions is still really hard to formulate, because it's just so not natural. And yet what I find is, what I want to do is help others to ask the questions. And I don't always have to have the questions, but if I can help them ask the questions or question what they believe, it is really important, because that's when we dig deeper and we don't just take things at face value or hold on to certain beliefs so tightly. Maybe we start to loosen them and start to wonder. And And that's what relationship can do, to begin to open and put those cracks in for them to look, so that they can have opportunities to heal, opportunities for growth, opportunities for hope. Because often, when, especially with exploited and trafficked, that level and amount of trauma that they have survived and endured, there is no hope. Hope seems ridiculous. Hope seems foolish. Hope seems stupid and irrational, because it's not the facts. The facts are this, this, this. The facts are I feel this, this. There is nothing. As one survivor said, there was there was no future to think about, and there was no past to think about. It was just the moment right in front of her. So when the trauma is that intense, there is no room. It is just surviving in that moment. And so just to begin to put cracks in there, to think about hope, to think of something different, it is a big step, but it's a process, and it only happens with relationship, presence, and consistent relationship.
Wow, that is so powerful. Questioning, questioning what we perceive to be the only thing, the truth. That is incredible. Being able to create a space for them where they never thought they could even perceive as anything other than what they see with their eyes and feel in their heart and in their body. I love that you do that. I love that even though it's difficult for you, you do dig in and ask those questions and invite a new consideration. Just even proposing that there could be a different reality than what they can only see in front of their eyes. We talk a lot about subconscious paradigms and how they are wounded when we have trauma. And it's so much more than just being able to talk through it. These things that you're saying, where you create the space and you create the relationship and you show up, this starts shifting those paradigms so that they can somehow find that spark that says it's actually safe and possible to think something different than what I've been thinking all this time. And as we look at each other with that compassion, I love how you invited that, saying that we've all been in traumatizing experiences. We've all been through difficult experiences to some degree or another. And if we assume that somebody else has too, then all of a sudden, doesn't that create a new filter where we can perceive somebody's behavior through, instead of just assuming, wow, they're a jerk, or they're so insensitive, or they are so irresponsible? If we can take that space, right, create that little space for ourselves and say, like you said, wow, what happened to make them think that that was okay? Then all of a sudden, we can create space for that person around us to heal, to become aware of their behavior and potentially shift and find peace and healing from their wounds too.
Yeah. I talk a lot about bursting people's bubbles,
Mm.
and also about normal, because it's human nature to have these invisible bubbles to protect ourselves, to, oh yeah, I don't want to think about that because that's just too scary. Or even just think of people who don't ever want to watch a horror movie. Oh, I don't want to be scared, so I'm going to not ever watch those. It's that same thing, but we do that throughout life with different things that we hear of things of darkness, things of evil, that we're like, oh, that's horrible. Okay, like people used to come up to me and say, oh, wow, thank you for what you're doing. I'm glad you're doing something. Pat me on the shoulder and walk away. See, that was them keeping their bubble up and think, good, you do that. I can continue to be in my bubble. And the other part, the normal, we all have different normals. So as you talked about, for the longest time, I thought if I knew it, everybody knew it. I mean, that's kind of dumb, but really that's it. I didn't think there was anything special about me. I didn't think I knew anything special. So I just had this was my filter. My assumption was, if I know it, well, you know it. So some people, when I would say things, thought, well, what, am I stupid? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you're acting like I should know. I'm like, oh, you didn't know that? Oh. Okay, but it was me, again, assumptions, because I don't know much, that they must know it. They must understand these things. And I truly did look at people that way. We all have our different normals. My normal, again, was a broken family, emotional abuse, and living at different places, and physical and sexual abuse. That was my normal. So I didn't know that what happened to me didn't happen to other people. Because, right, unless someone asks you to ask those questions or say something, you assume there is some level of, again, what I did, some level of what I did of assuming people understood things that I understood, assuming they experienced things like I experienced. Like when people experience certain abuses, especially as children, they don't really learn that it's not normal until they hear someone else talking about it like it isn't normal. And then they start to question, wait, oh, that doesn't happen. And you don't get beat, every time you're late. You don't get this. You don't get, people don't, we automatically think our bubble, our world is similar to other bubbles. So that's why when other people's bubbles, other people's normals are different than ours, then first we think either they're stupid or where have you been? We have these judgments or disdain for others automatically because it's not like what, again, even culturally, think about culture and race, which is really not race, it's really about culture, different cultures, dynamics. We can be uncomfortable around other people's cultural things, the way they live. It's that same thing. What is normal for them isn't normal for us. So it makes us feel awkward, less than, or just different. So these emotions come out in judgment. These emotions come out in all different kinds of things. So again, that's going back into the general reality of life, but then now bringing that back to trauma. People have endured lots of trauma. If the abuse started when they were young, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever it was, if it started when they were young and now when they got older, it just continued because, well, they're used to it, and other people look down on them and like, why do you let them do that? And you're thinking, well, I always have done this. What are you talking about? So I really try to stretch people's thinking about normal and about these bubbles that we as humans automatically do. It's a part of protection, but it's a protection that we need to open up. We need to willingly look at those normals. We need to willingly look at those differences, those things outside the bubble, whatever they are. And some, you don't have to go as deep as in other things, outside these bubbles, but we need to not be so afraid of what's outside that bubble, because just because it's not in our bubble doesn't mean it's going to hurt us. It's just, it might make us uncomfortable, right? These emotions, it's a way of protecting really our emotional state. And we need to get a little more comfortable with breaking bubbles and allowing that growth, because really it's growth, it's maturity, it's understanding. And that is how we can be more relatable, by realizing we have these different bubbles, and not just with trauma, but even just, marry someone in a different family and they come with a really different background and you're really uncomfortable around them. I just heard a story of someone who used to live on the streets and married this husband, and she's very dramatic, and then everything is about her, and I'm like, okay, so that's a great example of learning to deal with something that doesn't fit in your normal. And how are you going to deal with all these emotions that are triggered in you because how they act? So hopefully that made sense, because it might have been a roundabout circle.
Yeah, that's great, though. I think what it does is help me recognize to ask questions first before I make a judgment about something, a situation, or a person. Ask questions. I wonder why they did that. I wonder why they think that's okay. Or ask them directly. So, can you explain to me again, maybe in another way, what you mean? Maybe that's it. Just not being afraid to ask questions. Be
Yes.
a little bit of courageous
Be
to,
okay to be uncomfortable, a little uncomfortable. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to learn. I love that. Lean in and be willing to ask questions, and sound silly if you ask a question that they think you should know the answer to. It's okay. What's the worst that could happen? But on the flip side, what's the best thing that could happen? You could build a stronger relationship with that person because you actually took that moment, dismissed the fear and said, "No, I really want to understand. Tell me
Mhm.
more about that. Help me understand this piece." I face this with my kids. Right? I mean, it doesn't even have to be a stranger with some
Right?
crazy backstory. It can just be, wow, my teenager is doing something really interesting. And instead of immediately wanting to correct them, I'm still like, all right, maybe I should ask why they did that, or what made them think that that was a good response to their sibling or something like that. I think actually I'm pretty good at it with other people, but not so much with my kids.
Right? I understand that. I've had two kids, and yes, you're like, I just need you to, I want you to fit in my box. I want you to follow my rules so that I can be okay with everything. And it again, those are our automatics too of we care for them, but this is what works. So do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a better experience it would be that instead of just that, but even with our kids and with those that are close to us. Again, I am not good at this. This is I can talk about it easier than I do it. It is a new thing still that I'm trying to integrate, and I find it harder with my more intimate, more personal relationships than those that are outside. It's
Mm,
actually easier to do it with regular outside acquaintances instead of those that are closer because you already have automatics. You already have this is how you relate, this is how you connect. And so it's really hard to learn to slow down, especially if you're a talker like me, to hold your tongue and listen and try to think of what the questions do you want to know or what do you want to ask to really find the real answer and not just a correction, not just
mm,
something different.
I love that. Right. And another level of how do you ask a question that is sensitive, right? Especially in your line of work? It's one task to think of the questions to ask, but then run them through a filter of, okay, am I taking everything into account to make sure that this isn't a triggering question, an offensive question, a, whatever kind of question, insensitive question? I imagine that can be pretty daunting.
Hey, amazing listeners. Ready for a journey to emotional well being? I've got a gift just for you. Download your free Quickstart guide to emotional healing now. Take the first step toward healing emotional wounds and embracing joy. This step by step guide is your compass to a brighter, more empowered life. Dive into practical exercises and insights right from your pocket. Visit tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing to claim your free guide today. Let's start this transformative journey together. Your emotional freedom awaits.
Well, if I took that much time to think, it would be. But for me, it would be overwhelming. But I sometimes I try to slow down, and I have gotten better of slowing down and not talking this quick. But I'm also very task oriented. So
Mm,
I get okay, I got to do this, I got to do this and do this. So then boom, 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 boom. And then I'm not thinking about those things. I'm like, this is what needs to happen. This is what we need to do. And again, it's not the questions, but it's still that's how I'm wired that way. So sometimes it's messy and sometimes, oh, yeah, I could have done that better. Right. Oh, yeah. But that's okay too, because we're not going to do it perfectly. And it is a learning process. Relating to people is a learning process. Growing is learning. And it always goes back to, failure is the first step to improvement. Right. So there was an incident actually today with someone, and I'm like, ooh, she pointed out some things. I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, I said exactly what I wanted to say. I laid out some things. But again, the way you say it, the way like you're talking about thinking about the emotion behind it, thinking about those other details. Again, that takes practice to whether you're saying it or questioning it. But oh, yeah, I didn't really want it. I'm sorry it came off that way. That is not what I intended. That is not how I wanted and not what I felt. And I'm sorry. I will especially continue to stumble a lot. But again, being authentic. So I guess that's what that's leading me is to the other part is relating with people, being authentic. Again, I've been very broken. I've been doing lots of healing over the last 10 years and still, and I will learn forever, of course, but understanding to be authentic, to just be real, like, oh, you took it that way, not to be offended that, well, that's not what I meant. That's not how I meant it. It's like, oh, yes, I'm not always responsible how it's received, but yet sometimes there is, right? How we say things, how we present things does matter. The authenticity of being okay, being vulnerable enough, even if just being vulnerable is being authentic, being real, is being authentic. And I used to say I was always very real and pride myself on real. And I meant I was very blunt is what I really meant. But I thought I'm very real. I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. Uh, but now learning, well, authenticity is a little bit more than that. It's about being humble. It's about being vulnerable. It's about, ooh, okay, that's not what I intended. And so that's another really important piece of relationships, about helping, about being able to be present with someone who's hurting or someone you want to get to know, is being authentic. And vulnerability is scary, right? That's the scary part. That's usually why we have these triggers or these judgments. It's really because of vulnerability. And with my strengths and my background, you would think I don't trust people easily. It takes a lot for me to trust them, but yet in the right setting, in the right part, I am very open because again, that's I was very blunt always, but authentic and real, I can do that still. I will hold back if I don't know you that well or I'm not sure how much I can trust you, but I'll say that. I still will be very authentic. So you can be even authentic with people you don't really know and that you don't trust, just more limited on how much you share. And so authenticity is very, very important in relating to people and building relationship and listening and being present.
I love the different things that you're saying because they make me think of the listeners that we have who may not be traumatized themselves, or at least significantly, but live with someone or know someone who has been traumatized. And so, what kinds of things, you've already been saying them, but what other kinds of things could they do to reconnect with this person that they love? Because I'm sure they feel fear to say the wrong thing. I'm sure they feel afraid of the reaction if they do say something that's insensitive and that they could hurt that person that they love. I imagine it's so difficult to choose the wording carefully, to open yourself up to be authentic and vulnerable. Because, yes, I love that you said being authentic doesn't mean you just blast out everything about yourself and are totally an
Mhm.
open book, that there is a natural, healthy limit, a boundary that you still create.
That's the word right there. That's the next word that you were bringing out in me is boundaries. And again, they talk about that in all types of trainings and relationships, but I don't think still a lot of people still don't really fully understand what that means. Boundaries isn't just no or yes, and boundaries aren't always solid and stay there. They can move. You can choose to move them. You can choose to change them. I use a video on boundaries by Chapey Sears on YouTube, and I use that in our 102 training because he does such a great job. He's got a little bit of humor and it's about 20 minutes or so. And he talks about the problem of having no boundaries and having too many boundaries or walls or fences or concrete. He'll describe of
Right? He's
how
so
thick
funny.
or none at all, just like go with anything, and how neither is good, and that there isn't a fixed place for boundaries, that they should always be moving because you are learning and changing, and then who are you having a relationship with, who you have boundaries, and where are they at, and how are you in that relationship. So again, there's other, book on boundaries, which is helpful. There are great things, but it's a process. It isn't just reading the book and, oh, I understand boundaries. Now it's, do I understand it with this person? Do I understand it with this person? And again, it's those questions for yourself. what's safe for you, what's safe for them, what is acceptable. So like boundaries in friendships, there's people that you let in who you really trust, and so they can come all the way inside your door, right inside, and be with you. And then there's the yard around you, that some people get in there and they get close, they get to know some stuff, but they don't know. And then you got your gate and your fence, and people are outside there. But sometimes people will move from outside the fence to in the fence to in the heart, and some might have to get kicked back out and never let in again. There is nothing solid about boundaries. They're always moving and movable, but you get to choose. Other people will push, and they may not like those boundaries. They may keep pushing in their will, their desire on you, right? We have relationships who's bossier or more pushy, but you still get to decide. We have people pleasers, again, less boundaries. So they just let people keep doing because they want them to be happy, but they don't think about themselves, and that's not healthy. So boundaries is another huge part of understanding that that's a process and a journey, and it never stops. And so you also mentioned, like, if we had a loved one that was hurting and we wanted to be present, well, what if in that we want to be present and we said something was a trigger and now they lash out at us? So now all of a sudden we're like, wait, we're trying to help, and yet I'm the one being attacked. So that again is another lesson in boundaries. How do I help but yet protect myself? And that is where it can get really complicated. But again, there is no solid line, and only you can decide. You can talk to people and ask for help and understanding what you should do, take their opinion if you'd like, but you're the only one that can decide with what you'll put up with. And again, people who get abused, those boundaries are knocked away or pushed down or not around, and people do what they want to do to them. So boundaries is another very important aspect in relationship and for yourself throughout all types of relationships, business and personal.
Right. And as we lean into relationships and create these boundaries, how important it is for us to find and recognize where we're getting triggered, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we have
Yeah.
those conversations and we find ourselves getting agitated or uncomfortable, for us to make a mental note and say, oh, I better go figure that out, whether it's journaling or talking to somebody else or healing it somehow, being able to show up as non-reactive as possible can really make a lot of progress more possible, can really create a safer space, because it's all uncomfortable. It's all really difficult when we're talking about these wounds, and they're so deep, and they show up in different ways. And so I love the idea of creating boundaries and having them be movable, and recognizing, where is this comfortable for me? Do I need to shift that boundary a little bit until I can go heal something and overcome what's triggering me, so that I can show up in a beautiful, peaceful, supportive way to this loved one who is struggling? And I think that your insights are super helpful to bring that to the forefront and help us to recognize, okay, I'm new at this. I don't know exactly how to respond to this person who is struggling, and really, it doesn't even have to be a significant trauma that we're talking to somebody about, right?
Right. I really love that you touched on a really important part that I remember beginning to learn that. And sometimes I do it better than others because sometimes I'm very driven and task oriented. So doing a lot. So if you're like me, then it is even harder, but everyone can do it. But you said being more aware of your subconscious. And again, that can be oh, what is that in my gut or my neck? Or I feel this twinge, or, oh, I feel nauseous, or I'm uncomfortable, or a thought. Sometimes it's not just a feeling, it's a thought, but our subconscious is trying to relay things to us. And so often, if you're busy like me, you aren't paying attention. You're just doing your thing. But really, for yourself, and understanding yourself and understanding again those filters, those reactions, is really being quiet enough or listening or attentive to catch those things in your subconscious, because they're going a mile a minute. thoughts are flying through, different feelings. I remember one of the classes I that I was doing in the beginning for the women, but I had to do my own stuff. And I was like, well, sure, I got plenty of stuff that'll help me with women. Sure, I'll do this. And we did this body outline. And they talked about, well, where do you feel it? I'm like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean where you feel it? Oh, yuck. I don't want to talk about that. What do you mean where I feel it? What are you talking about? And it was so, and still to the day, I mean, I still even thinking about, ugh, but it's real, it's true. And slowing down and paying attention to those feelings, those spasms. Some people, it's very clear to them. People like me, we're just delirious, not paying attention to any of it until someone tells us we need to pay attention. And then those thoughts. And so I love that you touched on that, but I also wanted to highlight, because some people it's really hard, and it is very important, because that will help us grow, help us acknowledge the truth in us to be authentic. Because if we're not paying attention to that, we're not really authentic, because we don't really know we're going to what's in our mind instead of, well, what is really real? What is really true? Of what are we really feeling, or deflecting to something else because we're not paying attention to what's really happening here. No, it's this. It is a lot of that subconscious, and slowing down, paying attention, recognizing, and then asking those questions. Ooh, why did I feel that? Why is that happening? Wait, do I really think that? Those are questions to ask yourself to be more authentic and to do all the things that we've been talking about.
That's brilliant. I love that. I think it's what can really help us find more joy in our lives, even if we're not struggling with relating to other people.
Yes.
Taking that time, finding some kind of small meditation practice where you're sitting still and quiet for 5 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever you can handle. I think that can be such a profound shift in our consciousness, where we create safe space for ourselves to hear those messages, to listen to what our subconscious is trying to tell us. And we can maneuver different situations in our mind by ourselves where nobody else is around, and think about, okay, I had that conversation with so and so earlier, and I responded like this. Is that really how I wanted to respond? What was going on inside of me that caused me to respond that way instead of how I wish I had, which would have
Right.
been patient and loving and accepting and more nurturing of that relationship. But as we learn to listen to those messages and not be afraid of them, because I think when I first started any kind of meditation, I was afraid to be quiet with myself because of the thoughts and the feelings that surfaced. And so I would run away from them. I would constantly be busy. And if I wasn't busy with one thing, I would turn on a TV show so that I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts.
Yes.
And as I've progressed in my healing journey, it's not as scary as it used to be. So I'm okay sitting down for a minute and asking myself that question, even if it's not a profound, deep, amazing question, just asking, what's going on? How am I feeling?
And to know that it's not everything is truth either. So
Yes.
that's why you don't have to be so afraid. It's not all true. It's all, wait, do I really think that? Do
Yes.
I really feel that? Do I believe that? Do I want to think that? Do I want to? So we get to question, instead of, because our mind takes it all in, whether we're really paying attention, it is all affecting us. But we can stop and actually question, wait, do I want to accept that? Do I want to hold on to that? Or do I want to toss that out and say, no, that is not good. That's icky. So that was another thing, because that'll help, because fear is a real thing. Fear of the unknown, fear of being uncomfortable, but acknowledging that they're not all true, and that we get to choose even with our thoughts and those reactions of what do we want to do with those things.
Yes. Amen. That's perfect. Because we do automatically just kind of run on with that narrative and let it be there and let it repeat and let it ingrain in us, whether it's true or not. And often it's not. That's the thing, is most of the time, the thoughts that we hear and acknowledge or miss because it's so fast, most of them are not true. most of them are some kind of negative judgment of ourselves or of an experience we just had or of a person we just saw. It's usually some kind of negative evaluation of things, which most of them are not true. Most of them are judgments and not observation.
Yeah.
So I love that, shifting it, pulling back from the judgment, pulling back from the automatically assuming that everything that we think is real and true, to really questioning ourselves, right? Even if we're not in your care, coming out of an abusive situation or a traumatic situation, that valuable, beautiful nugget of challenging our own beliefs, challenging our own thoughts, and being aware of what truth we want to experience. How do we want to show up? How do we want to feel? What do we want our lives to look like? What do we want this relationship to look like? And intentionally creating a positive scenario, right? I mean, that's the value of affirmations and mantras, right? Is starting to help that awareness of what we do want to create and not just be subject to our subconscious and its narrative and our negative thoughts and their narrative and the messages that the world constantly is giving us. We
Right.
get to choose what we want.
Definitely.
So as we're thinking about our own traumas and these beautiful women who've been through such awful traumas, where do you see healing getting stuck on our journeys out of this?
Oh, well, so again, when we talk about traumas, a lot of traumas, we talk about like layers of an onion or shoots and ladders, because it's a good, either one is a good picture to understand of, because you're working on something and you're starting to get somewhere, and then you hit something else and you're like, what is this? It's another layer, it's another something, another trigger. And you're, and sometimes that one was worse than the other one, but you had no idea, because again of the layers of how deeply it's embedded.
Yes.
And so that's where I think, I guess we talk about grace and about truth and grace, is because the truth is there are layers to all sorts of things, and something you can be doing great and you can be in the deepest pit tomorrow because of something that just happened or something you just learned, right, that is just heartbreaking. And so that's the same with trauma, is you can go up and down, and that's life. This is life. Yes, it's harder when you're working through trauma. The ups and downs, they are hard, but that is really what life is like. Life is not just, the fields and the mountains. I mean, there's mountains, there's deep pits, there's valleys, there's fields, and it's a mixture all the time. And so learning and accepting that that's what life is like, because especially I think in American culture, we want things now, we want them quick, we want them easy. And when they're not, we want to quit or beat ourselves up or beat someone else up or whatever. But understanding that's really just how things work. And so to have grace, that the truth is that's reality. And yes, it is hard. And yeah, you can be doing great. It doesn't mean you're not okay. It just means it's just another piece that you can push through and learn and grow from, and find another level of healing, another level of hope, another level of joy, and be graceful with yourself, graceful with others, because it is hard. And there are no free passes. That's the one thing I struggled a lot with, is when I hear these horrific stories or lifetimes, is, Lord, why did it have to be so long? And why now it's still going to continue? Yeah, it'll be different and it won't be as bad, but there'll still be deep, sorrowful moments, because it's life. It's having relationship, but there'll be more joy. There'll be more hope. There'll be more freedom. So it's again knowing the truth, but also knowing the positives, and not focusing so much on the negatives. So that's the other part of the truth. Yes, this is really hard, but look, you already did this. You can do this too. And there's more joy on the other side of that. There's more freedom. There's more beautiful emotions to experience that you haven't experienced yet or in a long time. So the truth of that, and then the grace through it, are another two important pieces, I think, to continue moving forward in our journeys or in their journey.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you. And I love how you said the self, because we are not our traumas. They are not who we are. They are those layers of the onion. They are those pieces of us that need attention, that need nurturing. They are not who we are. They are not our identity. I love that. It's so beautiful, the joy and the hope and the healing that is possible. And I imagine that shift as we all shift from hopeless to hopeful and despairing and discouraged to seeing the possibilities again. That is a powerful, grace-filled moment. I love that. But I wish we could sit and talk for hours. This has gone so quickly. I'm so grateful to you and your wisdom and your love and your insights and your dedication to this cause. It's just so powerful. What one last message would you like to share to our listeners?
Well, I always say, as long as you have breath, there's hope. There may be deep wounds or deep pain that you feel right now, or that someone close to you is in, but as long as there is breath, there is hope. It can be hard, but if you hold on and persevere and fight for what you can have and what you deserve, or what they can have and what they deserve, then there is hope. So hold on to hope and fight for it. It doesn't just happen. You have to fight and persevere to get what you deserve, to get what you need, to get what you want.
I love it. Thank you so much, Krista.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope there was some hopeful, insightful things that people can use and apply for sure.
Yeah, it was powerful. Bless your heart.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with me. Remember to share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. Don't want to wait for next week for new insights and wisdom? Go to www.tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing for a free guide to help you begin healing the emotional wounds that are holding you back. Again, the link is tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing. It will be in the show notes as well. I believe in you. See you next week.